Layla and Kareem were supposed to be Dubai's perfect couple. Their wedding night was meant to mark the beginning of a glamorous new life together. But before sunrise, Layla was dead, and Kareem was in handcuffs. What happened inside that luxury hotel suite would shock the city and expose a secret past that no one could have imagined. Layla and Kareem were celebrated as the perfect couple. Their wedding splashed across social media feeds and whispered about in Dubai's most exclusive circles. Layla, with her striking beauty and elegant charm, seemed like she had stepped out of a dream. Kareem, the heir to a successful business empire, was admired for his discipline, charisma, and wealth. Together, they looked unstoppable, the kind of pair people believed were destined to live out a fairy tale. Their wedding night at a luxurious 5-star hotel became the highlight of the season. Guests traveled from around the world, filling the grand ballroom with laughter, music, and endless glasses of champagne. Every detail spoke of opulence, from the floral arches made of imported roses to the glittering diamond necklace around Layla's neck. Cameras flashed, capturing a bride glowing with happiness and a groom beaming with pride. On the surface, it was flawless, the kind of union families only dream about. But beneath the glamour, subtle cracks were already forming. Those who watched closely noticed how little was known about the bride's past. When relatives tried to ask her about her childhood or family roots, her answers were brief, always shifting the subject back to the present. She was enchanting, yes, but there was an air of mystery that didn't quite match the openness expected in a marriage of this scale. Still, in the glow of celebration, nobody dared to question it aloud. For Kareem's family, appearances mattered more than doubts. And for Kareem himself, swept away by the perfection of the moment, nothing seemed wrong at all. As the final song of the night played and the couple slipped away to their private suite, no one could imagine that within hours the dream would collapse into tragedy. From the start, Layla's past was wrapped in silence. Whenever someone asked where she had grown up, her answers were vague, drifting between mentions of studying abroad and living with distant relatives. She spoke fluently in several languages, which impressed many, but it also gave the impression of someone who had moved too often, never rooted in one place. Kareem's family tried to gather information before the wedding, but every lead seemed to fade into shadows. No one could find school friends, extended family, or even photographs of her younger years. Her story existed only in fragments, carefully polished for surface appeal. The absence of history was odd in a city like Dubai, where status and family ties often defined reputation. Kareem's relatives questioned how such a stunning, refined woman could appear almost out of nowhere. At dinners leading up to the wedding, her charm silenced doubts. She laughed at the right moments, showed impeccable manners, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who belonged among the elite. That confidence, however, only deepened suspicions. To those who noticed, it felt like she was performing a role rather than revealing her true self. Kareem, blinded by love and the excitement of building a life together, brushed aside concerns. He believed that whatever Layla kept private was her choice, not a threat. But whispers grew louder among his cousins and business associates, who warned him that something didn't add up. A bride without a past, they said, could become a danger to a man whose future depended on his name. Still, the wedding went ahead with no hesitation. The mystery was buried beneath layers of silk gowns and glittering diamonds. Nobody realized that those unanswered questions would soon unravel into a nightmare. The wedding celebrations stretched deep into the night, a display of wealth and joy that seemed endless. When the final guests departed and the music faded, Layla and Kareem retreated to the luxury of their private hotel suite. The room had been prepared with meticulous detail, rose petals scattered across silk sheets, flickering candles along the edges of the room, and a panoramic view of Dubai's skyline glittering like diamonds against the night sky. To anyone looking in, it was the perfect beginning to their new life together, the moment when dreams were supposed to feel real. For Kareem, the exhaustion of the long day mixed with anticipation. The world outside celebrated their union, but within those walls, everything narrowed to just the two of them. Yet amid the champagne and laughter, something unsettled him. He noticed a small, locked box tucked discreetly among Layla's belongings. It was unlike the rest of her things. Plain, worn, and almost hidden beneath her elegant gowns. The contrast struck him immediately. At first, he brushed it aside, convincing himself that it was probably filled with sentimental keepsakes, perhaps jewelry or old letters. But the thought refused to leave his mind. Throughout the evening, while Layla seemed calm and radiant, he found his eyes drifting back to that single box. It was a detail that didn't fit with the flawless picture she had painted of herself. As the hours passed, curiosity turned into unease. Kareem's instincts, sharpened by years of running his business, whispered that the box carried more than memories, carried secrets. While Layla prepared for the night, he felt an uncomfortable shift inside him. A growing suspicion that his new bride's perfection was hiding something far more complicated than he could imagine. Kareem's unease grew until it was impossible to ignore. The locked box lingered in his thoughts, pulling at him with silent insistence. When Layla stepped into the bathroom to freshen up, he moved quickly, his hands trembling as if he already knew what he was about to find. He searched her bag for the small key but found nothing. Desperation replaced hesitation, and he forced the box open with a sharp pull until the clasp snapped. What spilled out was not the kind of keepsakes he had expected. Inside lay a collection of documents, photographs, and letters that painted an entirely different picture of the woman he had just married. There were passports under different names, each with Layla's face but altered details. Old letters spoke of broken promises, failed relationships, and money disputes that hinted at betrayal. Among the items was a newspaper clipping from years ago describing the mysterious disappearance of a wealthy man abroad, one connected to her through marriage. The photographs were the most unsettling. They showed Layla with strangers in unfamiliar places, her smile unchanged but her identity shifting. One image showed her standing beside the man mentioned in the newspaper, a man whose fate remained unsolved. Another depicted her in modest clothing, far from the glamour she now embraced. It was as if she had lived multiple lives, discarding each one when it no longer served her. Kareem's heart pounded as the truth settled in. The woman celebrated as the perfect bride was someone else entirely, a woman who had spent years running from her past. The glamour, the charm, the flawless story, everything had been carefully built to hide the shadows lurking behind her name. And now, in his hands, the truth was undeniable. The discoveries in the box ignited a storm inside Kareem. The woman he had proudly introduced as his bride was not the person he thought she was. The passports and letters were not just signs of secrecy. They were proof of a double life. As Layla emerged from the bathroom, still glowing from the celebrations, the weight of betrayal bore down on him. The air in the suite thickened, no longer filled with romance but with suspicion and anger. Kareem's mind raced through everything he had seen. The newspaper article about her former husband's disappearance sent chills down his spine. Had she been involved, or was she only connected by circumstance? The unanswered questions twisted into a sense of dread. He thought of his own reputation, his family name, and the empire his father had built. To be linked to a woman with such a past could shatter everything. Layla's composure faltered as she noticed the broken box and the scattered papers on the bed. In that instant, the veil of mystery she had carefully maintained began to slip. Her silence was louder than any denial could have been. She did not rush to explain or plead. Instead, she stood frozen, her face unreadable, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. The truth became unbearable for Kareem. The idea that his perfect marriage was built on lies burned through him. Every whispered warning from his relatives now made sense. Every vague answer from Layla replayed in his mind like a cruel trick. To him, she was no longer just a stranger. She was a threat. The fairy tale ending he had envisioned crumbled into something darker, setting the stage for the violence that would soon erupt. The weight of betrayal pressed against Kareem's chest until it boiled over into rage. The glittering lights of Dubai outside their window felt mocking, as though the entire city was laughing at him for being deceived. His mind no longer focused on the romance of the night but on the humiliation that lay ahead if the truth about Layla came out. For a man whose reputation was everything, the discovery of her past was not just a personal wound. It was a public disaster waiting to unfold. Layla stood silently, her expression unreadable, as though she had been through confrontations like this before. That stillness only fueled Kareem's fury. He felt stripped of pride, reduced from a groom basking in admiration to a man trapped in a web of lies. The champagne, the roses, the whispers of blessings from hundreds of guests. All of it seemed meaningless now. In its place rose a violent storm he could no longer control. Each thought tightened like a vice around his mind. The passports meant she could vanish again, just as she had before. The letters hinted at betrayals that might one day involve him. The article about her missing husband was the final blow. The image of his family's name tied to scandal and deceit was unbearable. In a surge of anger, reason gave way to instinct. The bride he had once adored became the embodiment of everything he feared. Shame, ruin, and loss of power. The violence that followed was swift and unrelenting, born not just of personal betrayal but of desperation to erase the secret she carried. By the time silence filled the suite once more, the illusion of perfection was gone forever, replaced with irreversible tragedy. Morning light crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the hotel suite, casting a glow that sharply contrasted with the horror inside. When staff knocked to deliver breakfast and received no response, they assumed the couple was still resting after a long night of celebrations. But as minutes turned to hours, unease set in. Eventually, a manager used a spare key to enter, and what they found inside would remain etched in their memories forever. The room, once prepared as a scene of romance, now looked torn apart. The champagne glasses lay shattered on the carpet, rose petals scattered and trampled underfoot. Furniture had been shifted, evidence of a violent struggle that disrupted the perfection carefully staged only hours earlier. In the center of it all was Layla, her wedding dress stained and torn, her lifeless body lying across the bed. The delicate pearls in her hair were still in place, a haunting reminder of the bride she had been only the night before. The silence of the room was overwhelming. The sweet scent of flowers mixed with the metallic tang of blood, creating an atmosphere that unsettled even the most seasoned staff members. The image was unthinkable. Dubai's most admired bride, gone before her new life had even begun. The discovery triggered chaos in the hotel. Security sealed off the floor while authorities rushed to the scene. Within minutes, the suite became a crime scene, investigators photographing every overturned object, every mark on the walls. The wedding dress that had symbolized joy and unity now told a darker story of violence and secrets. What should have been remembered as a beginning would forever be marked as the night a fairy tale collapsed into tragedy. The news of Layla's death spread through Dubai faster than wildfire. Only hours earlier, her wedding had been celebrated as a union of elegance and power, but by morning it was the subject of every whispered conversation. Newspapers rushed to print the shocking story, while online platforms filled with speculation. How could a bride, admired by hundreds the night before, be found lifeless in her suite before the sun had fully risen? For the city's elite, the tragedy struck close to home. Many of them had attended the wedding, drinking champagne and congratulating the couple. Now they were haunted by the thought that they had toasted a marriage that ended in bloodshed. The glamour of the night transformed into scandal, and no amount of wealth or influence could shield Kareem or his family from the glare of public attention. As journalists dug deeper, the mystery surrounding Layla only grew. Her background, once overlooked, became the focus of relentless investigation. Reports surfaced of her multiple identities, her shadowy past, and her connections to a man who had mysteriously vanished years before. Some painted her as a manipulator who wove lies to secure wealth and power. Others saw her as a tragic figure, a woman running from a dark history she could never escape. Public opinion divided sharply. Was Kareem a cold-blooded murderer, or a man pushed beyond his limits by betrayal? Was Layla an innocent victim of his rage, or a deceiver whose secrets had finally caught up with her? In cafes, offices, and homes, people debated the case with fascination and disbelief. What began as a fairy tale wedding had become a citywide obsession, leaving everyone to wonder what the investigation would reveal next. Detectives wasted no time turning the luxurious suite into a controlled crime scene. Every shattered glass, every torn fabric, and every fingerprint was catalogued with precision. Forensic teams worked through the morning, piecing together the sequence of events that had transformed a wedding night into a murder scene. It didn't take long before suspicion fell squarely on Kareem. His fingerprints covered the broken box, the scattered documents, and the items that told the story of Layla's hidden past. When questioned, Kareem admitted to opening the box but denied intending harm. He described the shock of discovering her multiple identities and the newspaper article linking her to a missing husband. Investigators, however, noted the bruises, the signs of a struggle, and the sheer violence of the act. His explanation of losing control in the heat of betrayal began to look less like an excuse and more like a confession. As authorities dug deeper into Layla's history, the pieces of her life came into focus. Immigration records confirmed that she had entered Dubai under a different name. In Europe, an older case file tied her to financial fraud, though she had never been formally convicted. Her former marriage ended abruptly when her husband disappeared, leaving behind whispers of foul play. While none of these past incidents proved she was dangerous, they painted a picture of a woman skilled at reinventing herself whenever shadows closed in. The media latched onto every new discovery, portraying the case as a collision between deception and rage. Kareem was no longer just a grieving groom. He was the prime suspect in a crime that fascinated and horrified the public. The question remained whether the evidence would lead to justice or uncover even darker truths still buried in Layla's past. The trial quickly became one of the most talked-about court cases in Dubai's recent history. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse each day, eager to catch a glimpse of Kareem, once admired as a successful businessman and now accused of murdering his new bride. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension as prosecutors laid out a chilling account of what had happened on the wedding night. They argued that Kareem's discovery of Layla's hidden past had driven him into a violent rage, but rage did not excuse the brutality of his actions. To them, this was a clear case of murder, a crime committed in cold blood within hours of marriage. The defense painted a different picture. They described Kareem as a man blindsided by devastating secrets, betrayed in the most intimate way on the most important night of his life. His lawyers claimed he had acted in a moment of uncontrollable shock, a crime of passion triggered by deceit. They argued that Layla's history, filled with fraud and suspicion, had cornered Kareem into an emotional breakdown rather than a calculated act. Witnesses were called to testify, from hotel staff who described the state of the suite to forensic experts who explained the extent of the struggle. The documents from Layla's locked box were entered into evidence, their contents sparking gasps among those in attendance. Each detail pulled the courtroom deeper into a story that seemed less like reality and more like a tragic thriller. Day after day, the trial unfolded like a spectacle, blurring the lines between justice and drama. While the evidence leaned heavily toward Kareem's guilt, the undercurrent of Layla's mysterious past made the case far more complicated than anyone expected. The jury faced a decision that would forever define both their lives. When the jury finally returned with their decision, the atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with anticipation. Weeks of testimony, evidence, and speculation had built to this single moment. Kareem sat rigid in his chair, his expression unreadable, while reporters poised their pens and cameras. The judge's voice cut through the silence as the verdict was read. Guilty of murder. Gasps filled the room, and the weight of the ruling settled over everyone present. The fairytale groom, once the envy of the city, was now condemned as a killer. The sentencing sealed his fate. Years in prison awaited him, a future far removed from the life of wealth and prestige he once enjoyed. For Kareem's family, the shame was unbearable. Their carefully built reputation, their name held in high regard, was dragged into scandal. The empire that had taken generations to establish was now tainted by the actions of a single night. Yet even as justice was declared, the case left behind more questions than answers. Layla's hidden identities and the mystery surrounding her first husband's disappearance lingered in the public's mind. Many wondered if Kareem's reaction, while criminal, was sparked by secrets far darker than anyone could prove. Some whispered that she was not entirely a victim, but a woman whose web of deception had finally collapsed. Others insisted that no matter her past, nothing justified the brutality she endured. The verdict did not end the debate. Instead, it split opinion across the city. Kareem would serve his sentence, but Layla's shadowy history ensured the case would never feel truly resolved. In the eyes of the public, the trial had delivered punishment, but not closure. The truth, in many ways, remained just as fractured as the night it all began. Years after the trial ended, the story of Layla and Kareem still lingered like a ghost in Dubai's memory. The luxury wedding that began as a spectacle of love and wealth was now remembered as a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. For many, it was not just the crime that haunted them, but the unanswered questions surrounding it. Who was Layla truly? A deceiver skilled at creating new lives? Or a woman trapped in a past she could never escape? The fragments of her history uncovered during the investigation only deepened the mystery rather than solving it. Kareem remained behind bars, his once glamorous life stripped away, yet his name continued to be spoken in connection with one of the city's darkest scandals. Some viewed him solely as a murderer, a man unable to control his temper. Others argued he was a victim himself, driven to madness by betrayal and secrets too heavy to bear. The debate kept the case alive, ensuring that neither his guilt nor Layla's innocence would ever be seen in simple terms. The hotel suite where the tragedy occurred was quietly renovated, but staff whispered that its history could never be erased. Guests sometimes asked about the infamous wedding night, curious to glimpse the place where a fairy tale had ended in blood. The story became part of Dubai's urban legends, a reminder that even the most glittering moments can conceal unthinkable darkness. In the end, the murder of Layla on her wedding night was remembered less as a single crime and more as a symbol of hidden lives and dangerous secrets. The truth about who she really was died with her, leaving behind an enigma that no court verdict could ever resolve. The fairy tale had ended, but the mystery lived on.